forward to another good meeting. We will begin with the invocation. If everyone would rise for the invocation by the Reverend Fred Proteet, Associate Rector at Old Nation Episcopal Church, and remain standing after the invocation for the Pledge of Allegiance. Reverend, also, before you start the invocation, if we could have a moment of silence to remember what's going on in Texas and our friends in Texas, please.
By all means.
Thank you, Reverend.
Gracious Lord, we pray your protection for those in Southeast Texas, particularly those in Houston, and we ask that that be a lesson to us of the gravity of what is considered here at this council. These councilmen, these staff who dedicate their lives and their time to protect us, and we ask you to bless them. Bless our mayor and members of this council with your gifts of wisdom, creativity, and teamwork. Bind them together in your vision of justice and peace, giving them courage to seek unity found in common purpose, that this city of Virginia Beach may be a place of peace and prosperity where every person sees every other person as their own brother and sister, where excellent education and opportunities for work that satisfy and provide a living are available to all, where the growing gulf that separates people on the basis of race or wealth or creed will be reversed in our city. Make their work tonight effective. Help them to faithfully serve, that our city may each day become more and more a reflection of your kingdom that is to come. We ask this in the name of God. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Reverend, thank you for coming in. Really appreciate it. You have the roll call.
Yes, Your Honor, all members are present.
Do I have a motion for the certification of the closed session?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call for the question, please.
All 11-0, Your Honor.
Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes of the informal and formal sessions of August 15, 2017?
So moved.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Call for the question, please.
By a vote of 10-0, with Mr. Moss abstaining, you have about to do.
Mr. Mayor, just want to, I was absent from that meeting. I was out of town on the 15th.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moss. I open a public hearing on the non-exclusive franchise use of Intotela Fiber Networks LLC.
Your Honor, I have no one on that, but I do have Mrs. Mester signed up to speak on the ordinance of the same subject.
Okay, but nothing on the public hearing. So what item number is that, Ms.
It's
Madam
number
Clerk?
4 under consent.
So
But
under
she wants to speak on 1 and A and B and number 4 on the ordinances.
Okay, well,
And 5.
all right, I got to
And
start
then she
over
says
again.
adopt drain, whatever that means.
All right, what numbers does she want to speak on? I got
A
1A right.
1, A, and B, she wants to speak.
Basically,
And she doesn't show whether she's opposed or in favor. And then she wants to speak on the number 4, which is the non-exclusive, the same as a public hearing.
All right,
Then she wants to speak reference the appointment of the city attorney.
okay, what number is that, please?
That is number 5.
5.
Then what she wants to speak on the drain, I do not understand. What is it?
Number 3.
Number 3. Yes, the adopt a drain. And then she wants to speak on the Cavalier Shores. She already gave me that one.
You already gave me that one.
And
That
she
is-
wants to speak on the Ocean Bay and New Millennium under the planning items.
Hold on, okay, that's number 2?
No, there's two of them. Ocean Bay is
But she
number
just
2, and New Millennium's number
Wait, under planning, what do you want to speak on?
number 2 and number 4.
Okay, council, these were all on consent, we'll hear them. Okay, so you got to make some adjustments, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Where's the tattoo?
Did she want to speak on item 1B also?
Correct.
Yes, sir. And I can't find the tattoo parlor. I just mentioned.
It's 9.
Number 9, she wants to speak on number 9 for the tattoo parlor.
Number 9,
Yes, sir.
Planning.
Under planning.
under plan.
Then I have other speakers, Your Honor, on
Oh.
different subjects.
On which numbers?
I have this many, I just got them. On the planning, that's okay. Mr. Nutter wants to speak, oh, that's a planning item. Hold on, let me get these planning items out of the way. On Cavalier Shores,
That-
all the speakers are in favor.
Okay, that's on the ordinances, that's already being
Yes,
pulled.
sir. And on the Francis Land House, I have,
I don't want to speak because there's nobody opposed to that.
okay, all right.
All right.
So those two are out because. the-
Okay, please listen to what I'm going to suggest to the Vice Mayor, and Mr. Vice Mayor, if you'll see if I'm correct. I believe consent now could be item number 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, noting that 9E would be a no on Mr. Moss. Under planning, items number 1, 3, 5, 6, and 7. Does that go along with your notes?
Well, we have speakers on number, that's right.
5, 6.
Don't you have speakers on planning item number 6?
Oh,
No,
Okay.
All right?
what's that?
No, we're fine.
Okay.
Mr. Vice Mayor,
I'll do my best.
I'm praying for you right now, buddy.
you're not the only one.
Mr. Mayor,
Sir,
I'd like to make a motion for approval of the consent agenda. Item 2, under ordinances and resolutions, item 2, which is a resolution to authorize a contract between the Virginia Beach Community Services Board and the Commonwealth of Virginia. Item 6, which is an ordinance to authorize an application of 5073 Virginia Beach Boulevard LLC for the closure of a portion of Euclid Road to increase the display area and perimeter landing for vehicles in the Bayside District. Item 7, which is ordinances to authorize temporary encroachments into portions of city property. A, Bass Inlet East for Joy M. Giavantorio and Richard G. McClellan Ray A. Pier at 2812 Bluebell Drive in the Princess Anne District. B, Black Duck Inlet for Marshall H. Groom Jr. Ray A. Marginal Wharf at 305 Back Bay Crescent in the Princess Anne District. C, Lake Holly by Lake Holly East, a condominium on behalf of Unit and Owners Association Ray, a bulkhead and pier in the Beach District. D, Lake Holly for Louis Shine and Sandra Harvey Ray, a floating pier at 312 Arctic Crescent. E, Lake Rudy for Carter M. Turpin Jr. and Caspar Holdings LLC. Ray, maintain existing facilities and constructing wood piles and floating deck with a boat lift at 227 Mediterranean, 600 Goldsboro Avenues in the Beach District. Item 8 is ordinance to establish a new capital improvement project and appropriate and transfer funds. A, traffic safety improvement. 4, B, Cape Henry Lighthouse restoration. 2, C, Foxfire Trail pedestrian bridge. D, city bikeways and trails plan implementation. 9, item 9, ordinances to accept and appropriate. A, $28,584 to the fire department for hazmat team equipment. B, $50,000 to fire department for tactical rescue team equipment. C, $202,868 from the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services to the Human Services to expand in their permanent supportive housing program. D, $12,852 from Virginia Department of Health Training Grant to Emergency Medical Services. E, $3,485,396 carry forward from fiscal year 2016-17 to fiscal year 2017-18 and various departments with previously approved operations. And F, $49,637 of the Francis Land House Trust Fund to the Department of Aquarium and Museums, and authorize a donation of $49,637 to the Friends of Historic Houses of Virginia Beach. Madam Clerk, would you please note that Mayor Sessoms is abstaining on item I-6, on item 7B, on item 7C, and Mr.
Is E, not C.
E, excuse me, item 7E.
Not C, right?
Correct.
Right, E. And Mr. Moss is voting no, and also Ms. Abbott is voting no on item 9E.
And open a
Have it,
public
yeah.
hearing on planning.
Thank you.
Got all that?
I do, sir.
Okay. Under planning for consent, first, the application of clearance E, endorse V. Bryan and Cindy Feldman for a variance to subdivision regulations, Ray lot width at 3388 Eagle Nest Point in the Lynn Haven District. Item 3, which is the application of Virginia Beach Boulevard, which is 5073 Virginia Beach Boulevard for modification of conditions, reassigned for motor vehicle sales at 5073 Virginia Beach Boulevard in the Bayside District. And please note the mayor is abstaining on item 3. Item,
How about item 2?
Item 2, you
Oh,
had us
you're in
pulled.
that one, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Item 5, which is application of Outdoor Resorts of Virginia Beach Condominium Association, Inc., for a modification of conditions, Ray vehicle length for a recreational resort community at 3665 Sandpiper Road, Princess Anne District. Item 6, which is for approval of the application of Freedom Properties VB LLC for a conditional change of zoning from R15 to conditional O2 at Wolfsnare Road and First Colonial Road in the Lynn Haven District. Item 7,
And I'll be abstaining on that.
and please note that the mayor is abstaining on item 6.
Yes, Your Honor.
Item 7, application of Myrna Holdings LLC and Alan D. and Patricia A. Young for a conditional change of zoning from R7.5 to conditional O1 at 656 Alberthus Drive in the Lynn Haven District. So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Have a motion to have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call for the question, please.
Mr. Mayor.
By a vote of 11 to 0, you have approved the consent agenda as read by the Vice Mayor, noting the nay vote of Mr. Moss and Mrs. Abbott and the abstentions of the mayor.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I'd like to
Please.
explain my note. I voted no on item 9E, which was for the reallocation or bringing forward about $3.3 million from last year into this year. Not because I didn't think the items in all cases had merit, but as to the mechanics for all those departments were under-executing their budgets historically, and therefore in the current year budget, they should have more than ample funds to incur those expenses, and those dollars should have gone into the city surplus for reallocation to higher priorities. with the exception of donations, which were a small number, and DEA seizure revenues. I think often what we do is, in these kind of cases, we carry the money forward rather than putting it into the city to look at and reprioritizing. We perpetuate these surpluses, which in effect represent excessive taxation.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. To the public, I want to remind everyone that the city council speaker policy that allows certain representatives of groups to speak for 10 minutes applies only to planning items and items where a public hearing is required by state law. As to all other items on the agenda, each speaker, whether speaking individually or on behalf of a group, will have 3 minutes to speak. That being said, council, if you all bear with me, I think I have a way to get through this the quickest. We will come back to item 1A. We will now move to 1B, and if you'll call the speaker, I'll let her speak to all the ones she wanted to speak to.
Yes, Your Honor, but I did not hear who seconded the consent agenda. Would you please?
I did.
Thank you.
Can I ask for clarification, just to make sure I understand? So the person that will be speaking will speak to all the items they chose to speak for and get 3 minutes for each one of those
You
issues?
can have up to 3 minutes.
For each one?
Yes.
Okay, just making
Yep.
sure.
Okay, Ruth, if you would go ahead and call Barbara, please.
Mrs.
lot of minutes.
Messner, would you please come forward? And you're to speak on all of the items. Please
If-
delineate what you're speaking on.
Okay, am I
Well,
the
I'll go
only
down the list
speaker?
with you. 1B was the first one that you wanted to speak on, the sewer and sewage disposal.
Okay, but I'm just asking, am I the only speaker on all of these items?
All but 1A, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And they were all on consent.
Okay. Right, and that's one of the things I want to speak on, is the consent agenda and the way you roll everything into one vote instead of individual votes.
I'm going to ask you to stay to the subject. You're on
Okay.
item 1B, sewer and sewage disposal.
Okay, the sewer. Okay, I found out when I called the office that the citizens, you're changing this payment schedule again. From what I understand, it just says payment schedule. I found out that people with 1,000 square foot property pay the same thing as somebody like an event house that has 10,000 square feet for both sewer and water. And I also don't like, paying monthly because it's an additional hassle, and there are other fees, and there are other people who've posted that there's, that they don't like this, the new method. I don't think we had a chance to vote on it. Okay, what is the next item?
Your next item was resolution to support the adopted drain program.
Okay, yeah, I'm a little shocked at the resolution, because we already pay to have their, along with the sewer, water, sanitation, et cetera, and all our fees, to have their public roads, their drains cleaned. And I just don't see why we would be adopting them for us to have that burden when some of these are 50 years old, and cleaning the drains is not necessarily going to stop the problem if the drains are broken and the sewers pipes are leaking,
Okay,
okay?
fine. Non-exclusive franchise for the Selco into Telefiber.
Okay, I didn't get a chance to look up who this is that's partnering with Verizon, but they're asking for a non-exclusive franchise for private companies to use our rare, disappearing public streets and right-of-ways. I just oppose the uncontrolled growth in all of these new cell towers and new partnerships. Okay?
The resolution to appoint Joseph M. Kurt, Assistant City Attorney.
Okay. Do I have to have that light?
No, you shouldn't have that light. Could you please pull the light back? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, as far as the city attorney, we have 39 city attorneys, along with legal staff, and we also hire several outside law firms, including Kaufman and Knowles. And I'm not sure, but it says there's a Katie Gilman Davenport that's with Kaufman and Knowles, which would, I think might be Ben Davenport's wife. But I don't understand why we're paying all these outside law firms on top of paying for 39 city attorneys. And then most of these law firms have conflicts because Kaufman and Knowles is hired on and Wilcox Savage, who Jim Wood's son is an associate with, even though he doesn't live at your house right now. They're both hired on the Arena project, okay? And
Okay.
where's the next item?
We'll go into planning now. That's a public hearing on planning, Ocean Bay Homes, item number 2.
Okay. We already did Cavalier Shores?
No, we're coming back because we
Okay.
have other speakers on that.
Okay, I'm sorry, what was it again?
If you're responsible enough to be calling to say what you want to hear, you can also follow. Okay, it's item number 2, Ocean Bay Homes.
Your Honor, she did not call. She wrote the notes here.
Okay, have you got your
Okay.
note?
And I also thought, since we're being technical.
Ocean Bay Homes, ma'am,
If you
please
were,
speak to it.
if you abstained, that you weren't supposed to stay in the room with all these discussions, so let's be
Ocean Bay
technical.
Homes, please.
Okay, yeah, now, all these amendments and special privileges for people, and we have uncontrolled growth, all these huge, oversized homes all over the place. The setbacks are almost non-existent, and we have flooding and drainage problems all over the city. So I oppose any more growth until you fix the infrastructure.
New Millennium Senior Living, item number 4.
No, we have other speakers on that one. Let's see, other speakers.
We have other speakers.
Okay, excuse me, I'm sorry on that. Franklin Johnson Group, item number 8.
We have other speakers on that.
We have other speakers on that one.
Okay, item number 9, Sacred Daggers.
We're okay
Oh,
on that.
Yeah, I'm tired of everywhere I look, tattoo parlors all over the city. Love shacks, tattoo parlors, strip joints. I just think the city is not that family friendly.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome very much.
Good luck, Mr. Vice Mayor.
All right. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval under ordinances and resolutions, item 1B, which,
Mr. Vice Mayor, we have another speaker on that adopted drain, if you'd like to hear that first.
okay, all right.
Reed Grenham.
We welcome you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. I came out this evening to support this program. I feel that it's critically important, particularly if we take a look at Houston, that we do everything, that we refocus our priorities, and then sort of leveraging off of Mr. Moss's comments about reappropriating the $3 million. It is all about priorities, and we really should be focused on flooding. It can devastate our city, and I think sometimes we get off track on that. And while this is a small step in the right direction, on the larger grand scheme of things, we have a need of urgency, not a 15-year plan, but an immediate plan. The devastation that could be brought to our city could be catastrophic, and we drag our feet. So I appreciate this effort, and I would encourage all of you to really go home and think about, and particularly Mr. Hanson, City Manager, expediting our plan to deal with these flooding problems. It really can wipe out everything else that we're doing. So thank you, Jessica, for this resolution. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. And seriously, think much more about flooding as a higher priority than some of the many other things that we would like to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Mayor,
All right. He was speaking on
3.
on 3,
Yes, sir.
I think. All right. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval under ordinances and resolutions, item 1B, which is to amend the city code sections 28-28, 28-29, and 28-30, raise sewer and sewage disposal pertaining to the payment due date for sewage disposal, and 37-53, 37-55, Ray water supply pertaining to the payment of the date water usage,
Mr.
and that's as modified.
Okay.
Item 3, which is a resolution to support the adopted drain program to maintain management of stormwater. Item 4, which is ordinances to grant a non-exclusive franchise to install, maintain, and operate telecommunications facilities in the public streets and rights-of-way to A, Cello Partnership, doing business as Verizon Wireless, and B, IntelliFiber Newtworks LLC. Item 5 is a resolution to appoint Joseph M. Kurt as Assistant City Attorney effective September 14, 2017. And let's see, under planning,
Open public hearing for planning.
under planning, item J2, which is the application of Ocean Bay Homes, Inc., and Patricia A. Martino, trustee of the Patricia A. Martino Living Trust for a variance to subdivision regulations, Ray non-conforming single-family dwellings, 2422 Baltic Avenue in the Beach District. Clerk, please note that the mayor is abstaining on that item. And item 9 is the application of Sacred Daggers LLC and Gibson Enterprises LLC for a conditional use permit for a tattoo parlor at 3972 Holland Road in the Rose Hall District. So moved.
I have a motion to have a second.
Second.
What?
I think there's some things that got skipped. Number 2,
No, they did.
2, and all of these.
No, they're done.
But they're done.
Did them all? Oh, okay.
All right,
Oh, we did them all.
So moved.
Second.
thank you. Call for the, any discussion? Call for the question, please.
Yeah, I know.
Just trying to move on.
Mr. Irving,
Sorry.
by a vote of 11 to 0, you have adopted the items read by the vice mayor. Now, may I ask a question, Your Honor? Did I hear 2 motions for and 2 seconds? What
I
happened?
never,
No, that's easy, nice.
Take the first two you heard.
we don't give a credit, I didn't hear, maybe go with all the conversation,
Okay.
whatever it is.
All right,
Good.
council, bear with me. I'm going to try to get us through the ones we haven't. We'll now go to ordinances to amend the city code sections 21-353 and 21-354 regarding Cavalier Shores neighborhood pertaining to residential permit parking. Call the speakers, please.
Sam Brown?
We welcome you tonight, sir.
Mayor, members of council, I live at 211 44th Street, and although there may be a parking issue, I've just gone down on the record as being opposed to the ordinances with a sign as written. The petition that was circulated is not what's being reviewed tonight. The hours are different, and paragraphs A and B were not in the petition. We were submitted a petition to have it start at 4 o'clock. This is beginning at 5 o'clock. I have a rare situation that I can walk out my front door, step onto the historic walkway, and go down to 44th Street and not see a mailbox, garbage can, telephone pole, or any sign. And I just think that maybe there's another solution. Mr. Thompson, when I spoke on his behalf earlier before this council, said that he would be self-contained. And now the problem is he's not being self-contained. The parking is not going to be self-contained. And we're going to be becoming a parking lot, which we're concerned about. I think there's other mechanisms that could be put into place, and maybe the city council could review our situation. I've suggested, and neighbors in our area have suggested, that maybe each homeowner get two parking spots in front of our historic area, as opposed to putting up these big, massive signs. I think that takes away from the beauty of what we have. And I know it's a tough decision, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you for coming down tonight.
Excuse
Next-
me,
One
excuse
second.
me,
Oh,
Mr.
please.
Brown.
Yes.
So Besides the time, what else is different on the petition?
Well, the petition was at 4 o'clock,
Right.
from 4 to 6, and paragraphs A and B were not in the petition.
What does paragraph
they
A and B?
A just simply says you can't put a bicycle or a golf cart or anything on the street, and paragraph B says at, between the hours of 8 PM and 6 AM, you can't put, got to put your permit there. So we didn't address no bicycles or golf carts at all at any time in this designated residential permit parking area. That was never addressed before. And we do have golf carts that come down to the beach. We have people that ride mopeds. We have bicycles. That A wasn't in the original petition, and the hours were 4 to 6. That's what the neighbors voted on. So I know it got amended somewhat, but again, I think the city's in their own discretion, and that's why we pay y'all the big bucks.
And we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Mayor,
Barbara Messner.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Brown.
one second. No.
Never mind,
This is
excuse
to the
me.
staff. But before we go any further, I want to make sure that that everything is legal here, because they're saying that the petition that was signed and circulated. I'm not talking about you, I'm talking to the staff. The petition that was signed and circulated is not reflective of what's here, and that's a issue that I'm not sure.
I would interpret the petition process to apply to the administrative application of the program that it allows action without further action by this body, that allows the manager to designate the area. You, as the council, have the discretion to establish a RPP program with new terms. So I think legally you can do it, whether you choose to exercise your discretion to do it because the petition was different, I think is a judgment that you as council members can make.
But, let me ask a question.
Go ahead,
I
please.
have a But part of the program is 75% has to sign the petition. The petition is different
Wait, I'm color coding.
than,
If you want to tell them that they have, that you're going to defer this and make them go back and get a new petition with 75% on the terms that are presented to the body, I think you can do that, but I don't think you're legally required to.
Thank you very much.
Don't put that on me, please.
Could I follow up?
Oh,
with that?
please, John.
Thank you. To the city attorney, not to the city attorney. If I understand you correctly, if we wanted to act, 75% or 10% or 100% isn't controlling for our ability to act and establish in a program.
I believe that the manager is bound, if he's going to do it, to have a petition that says 75% of the neighborhood wants to participate. I don't believe that you, acting as a body, have that same limitation, although you may choose to apply it.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Barbara Messner. Does she have 3 minutes this time?
Everybody has 3 minutes for each subject.
Okay, should I wait for them to finish their sidebar?
No, ma'am, go right ahead,
Okay.
please.
Okay, so, all right. I'm glad Sam Brown spoke, because this ties in with the Arena project, not Arena, the Cavalier project, and Mr. Davenport's wife is the sales director for that, so I would think he would abstain.
You know, that's a total
Okay,
mistake.
no, it is not. Okay, you can discuss it when I'm finished my 3 minutes. And
But
Ms.
you-
Wilson has taken donations from Bruce Thompson, and I think she has a conflict to her husband's company, even when she was on council in 2000, did all of the CPA work for Bruce Thompson, so I don't think she should vote. And I don't know how many people at the North End are aware, when Mr. Thompson said he was going to save the Cavalier Hotel, that we'd have those high-density houses, that there would be tour buses for the breweries and the restaurants, and that the parking is going to disappear all over the oceanfront, and now people are asking to restrict parking like they do on 25th Street, 21st Street, 22nd Street. Those are for high-density projects now, private parking only where it was for the public. So You know, all the people that can't park at the oceanfront are heading to the north end, and I oppose, you know, restricting access to public streets at the oceanfront. And like I said, I don't think people who have conflict should be voting on this.
Thank you very much. Mr. Moore.
Mr. Mayor, I think a peer should never have to defend themselves. And so, because I think that this job is hard, but I really, and you know, Ben and I don't always agree, Mr. Davenport, but I have a lot of respect for Mr. Davenport. Mr. Davenport's wife in no way is associated. There may be a council member, that's not my job to police that, but I can tell you it's not Mr. Davenport. We often agree, but he's honorable in his service. And this is a tough enough job that I just want to make sure that people watching and the people here know the difference, that what was said today was not correct. And Mr. Davenport, no way has a conflict on this issue. And we may not agree on it, but we honor each other's service.
Thank you.
And I don't have a conflict on this issue
Yeah,
either.
Ginger Cap?
Next speaker, please. We welcome you tonight.
Thank you. Hi there. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council, Mr. Mayor. It's a pleasure to be here. I am a resident of 16th Street, the 300 block. I've lived there since 1998. I am also a serving member of the Traffic, Parking, and Pedestrian Committee as well. Before that committee, I served on another committee that is also a subcommittee of RAC. And we have looked at the RPPP since at least 2012. And this is an issue that's been on our table, and it's been a hot button issue for a really long time. Other neighborhoods within the oceanfront have requested to have the RPPP time dialed back to 5 p.m. as well. And we've always been told, no, that cannot happen. I mean, for the residents, 42nd Street, our North End residents, welcome to the RPPP. If you would like to be a part of it, by all means, join us. However, for them to be allowed to dial back that time to 5 p.m., that's not okay. Other neighborhoods have asked for this for a long time. I'm not exactly pro or against the 5 p.m. thing. I just think if you do for one, you do for all. If you cannot do for all, you do not do it at all. Thank you.
very much.
Yes, sir.
Next speaker.
I think that's all the speakers right now.
Lots more, but they're all in favor.
They're all the others are in favor.
Okay.
You want to hear them?
Yes, ma'am.
We don't want anybody to come down here and
Bernice Pope?
Quite a night.
Sorry.
Hi, good evening. I'm Bernice Pope. I am president of the Historic Cavalier Shores Civic League, and I am here tonight to represent the over 90% of our residents who have signed this petition. The petition was originally, I'll address the issue about the 4 and the 5 o'clock. It was originally designed for 4 o'clock because we felt that at 4 o'clock, most of the beach residents would be off the beach. There was expressed some concern from council staff about 4 might be a little early, so we revised it to 5 o'clock. We did have a civic league meeting. We notified everybody on the email that the time would change from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. We also had the city attorney draw the ordinance for us, so we would make sure that it was right. So this came directly from the city attorney's office, and this is what we used. I do want to say that, just to recap a little bit, that the Historic Cavalier Shores community on 42nd, 43rd, 44th, and part of 45th Streets barely has enough parking for residents today. Now we're facing an unbelievable parking pressure, even though the Cavalier Hotel hasn't opened yet. Only a few homes are occupied, and we have residents from the few homes that are living there now in the Cavalier residences parking on our streets. Their cars are not able to, number one, make that turn to get into their garages. They have not adequate parking, so that we have already realized cars parking from the residences in our neighborhood with only a handful of people that are actually living there. The only solution for us is an RPP policy similar to the South End. However, the RPP we need must start at 5 o'clock, not at 8 o'clock, as in the South End. You will recall the South End problem was nighttime and restaurant patrons. On the other hand, Cavalier Shores residents will be coming home from work around 5 o'clock and find parking spaces taken by Cavalier visitors, employees, and guests. We need to park on our streets to unload groceries, safely discharge our children, and to park within a reasonable distance of our home. Once the Cavalier is completed, that will not be possible without a RPP program from 5 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. Next speaker.
Do I get 10 minutes since I'm the
No,
president?
ma'am. This isn't
Okay.
planning.
Okay,
I do
But
have
you
a question.
do have to have your
Yeah, question.
petitions because you made them a part of the record.
okay.
Mr. Jones.
Lee Woodard?
Wait,
Hold
wait,
on,
Mr.
hold
Jones
on.
has a question.
Ms. Pope?
Yeah.
The way the ordinance is drawn up states on line 72 through 74, no permit, however, shall be issued pursuant to this section for employee parking in the Cavalier Shores neighborhood. If that clause were taken out, would you still be supportive of the ordinance?
The 5 o'clock?
No, 5 o'clock would stay in, but the part that would come out would be the clause that says, "No permit, however, shall be issued pursuant to this subsection for employee parking in the Cavalier Shores neighborhood." So,
Parking would be allowed from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m.?
no, they'd have to get a permit just like anybody else, but it would start at 5 o'clock. Just the 5 o'clock time would be there.
Well, the problem is, I think, with employee parking, the employees are relying on valet parking only. The Cavalier residences are relying, if they have guests, for valet parking only. If the parking garage is full, if the employees are running late, they will be parking in our neighborhood. We're the only neighborhood that is directly impacted by the Cavalier complex. And I don't know what the numbers would be for the Cavalier Hotel. I mean, it was stated that Bruce Thompson has not actually sought parking passes in the past for his hotels. So I don't know what the impact of that would be on our neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Well, let me follow up.
Oh, please.
So then, is the employee parking the main issue that you have?
The 5 o'clock would be, I would consider the main issue for us, 5 o'clock start time. Yeah, for the residents to be able to park when they get home. We only have a limited amount of parking, and most of it's already taken by the residents.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Lois.
Before you
Don't
go,
forget your petition.
if I could have a question on, excuse me, ma'am?
Bernice,
Mrs. Pope,
Bernice, you got another question?
I'm just trying to make sure I understand, because, so your point is, hi, how are
There
you?
you are. I thought you were over here. Okay.
Bouncing my voice off,
Sorry.
a TV show maybe. But trying to get straight. So you're saying is that within your neighborhood today, before the Cavalier, before anything this council did to your neighborhood, that's something we did for you, with your money, that there was insufficient parking between what's on your residence and what is on the street to accommodate the vehicles that the property owners own? Am I getting that right? Because you're saying that when you come home, like people from work, they're going to come home and there's no place to park.
Well,
That's representation. I'm trying to make sure, I can see how that could happen down there, because I've driven around and saw how little, with the driveways and the road, you can't use
I
at
think
all.
without the Cavalier residences, without the hotel opening, we're going to have, a distillery, a bourbon bar, happy hours, wedding venues. It's going to be, a very active scene. So I think people with only the opportunity to park and through a valet, they're going to be moving on to the streets where there's available parking. During the day, we don't have a problem virtually parking and coming in and out. It's when people are coming home from work, if there's an additional stress in our neighborhood for parking, because we expect Bruce Thompson's going to do a fabulous job with his hotel and all the venues that are going to be happening, not to mention what's going to be across the street when that opens. So we're in the direct, impact our neighborhood is.
Don't have any other-
What I'm trying to understand, Mr. Mayor and Vice Mayor, is I'm trying to think that, and that's maybe later, the larger discussion, but making sure I understand is that there's only a certain amount of capacity between the lots and the street for parking in that area.
Correct. And
So-
we're full.
Okay.
We're full,
And,
yeah.
well, full to some extent, whatever full means. So therefore, it means even if someone thought that some amount of employee parking may be a good idea, there would certainly be a more constrained application of how many of those there could actually be in order to make sure that the residents themselves, between their lot and the street, had sufficient space to always park their vehicles. I think that's probably, because we've created the situation that has created the impact. So I'm just trying to make sure, I got what you got, I know what you're asking now, I'm just trying to understand all the chemistry here as to, where the harm is and where the mitigation for the harm might be.
Right. Well, what's going to happen, right, what makes us different from the south end is that we're going to have 109 residences, 534 hotel rooms, a 700-seat meeting venue, a 200-seat meeting venue, and at least 6 restaurants, bars, and an army of employees and special venues going on right at our doorstep.
I'm with
Okay.
you, and I know we made that possible.
So, you all did. We asked for your help 4 years ago. Parking was a big concern, and now it's right on us. It's coming, December, looks like they're gonna open. We already are impacted. We have people parking on our streets, I promise you, right now, from the Cavalier residences, they have SUVs and trucks, and they cannot get into their driveways. I mean, they don't have any other place to park. The garage isn't open, and Bruce, the garage is only available to the residents when there's space available.
I got you. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Okay, Jim Wood and then Barbara
Yeah,
Kelly.
just to address what you said, John, another one of the issues, and I drove through the neighborhood the other day after we got the agenda, and one of the issues, frankly, that continues to be there is encroachments on the right-of-way. And I've mentioned this to the manager before, that in this area, we need to take a look at that as part of this, because, people are putting things there to box off parking. That,
Right. Well, the other thing is, we have a historic sidewalk that you all have preserved that sidewalk, which prohibits us from having front-loading driveways and garages and things like that. Our only option is to park on the street. We have limited alley parking. We have a lot of grandfathered garage apartments and things like that, since we are a 90-year-old neighborhood. So, we need your help, is what we need.
Barbara?
I was just confused because you said you're already having the problem.
with the residences, the people that have moved in.
How would we cure that?
If we had a RPP program that prohibited them from parking from 5 o'clock to 6 a.m. I don't know how, the only way we're going to stop them from parking there is if we have a sign that says they can't.
I understand.
And that's what we need.
Yeah.
Ms. Pope, I've spoken with you several times on this, a young lady came up and spoke and mentioned that the RPP program on the south end of the beach is 8 o'clock to, if the problem is the residents parking, how would it impact moving it back to 8 o'clock to fall in line with the rest of?
Because people get home from work at 5, and we've got venues that are open at the Cavalier and the residents, yeah.
So the problem is not the residents of the Cavalier
It's,
Hotel?
Today,
Or
it's
the Cavalier residences.
When the hotel open, it's going to be the restaurants, the venues, the hotel guests. The parking garage will get full. I personally have gone to parking garages in Norfolk at the Main and also down here on 34th Street, and there's a big sign that says valet is full. So valet, if you've got some activities going on and all the things that are going to be happening there, there's a 200, you all might know how many parking spaces there are there, but there's a couple hundred parking spaces at the Cavalier on the Hill. And that takes care of the residences. Now, if people are going to wait for their car to park down to 34th Street, or the only public parking garage that's near our neighborhood is 32nd Street. That is the closest public parking garage. We have no other parking in our area.
Shannon?
Hi, Ms. Pope. Can you clarify, you made a comment earlier that there's some residents that have already been sold and they can't get into their garages. Is that because there's construction going on or because of
No,
poor design?
because they're narrow streets and they're driving F-150s, SUVs. They own these cars that literally do not have, there's not enough in the narrow little alleys there to go to their garages. If you ever walk there, they cannot make the turn. So we have probably 3 that we know of right now. Their only option is to park on our street.
So they bought a house and they can't get their car into the garage?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Next speaker, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lee Woodard. And the next speaker is Benson Oliveri.
We welcome you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I appreciate it. There are a lot of details to this that I don't know, and the things that Sam Brown was referring to, I don't even know what the ordinance says at this point or what the wording is at this point. I just wanted to highlight one piece of this. I'm a resident, sorry, my name's Lee Woodard. I'm a resident of 43rd Street in the Cavalier Shores neighborhood and been there 17 years. The main highlight I'd like to make is that we're not trying to restrict public access to the beach. We realize it is a privilege to live there, and we don't want to keep the public from having access to it. It is true that on big weekends in the summer, we might have to park a block away from our home in order to, just because on big weekends, a lot of people are there at the beach, and so be it. We're willing to live with that, and we do it every summer, for at least a few of the weekends. And that's part of, what you deal with when you live there. And I believe a lot of my neighbors feel this way, but I'll only speak for myself and the few friends that I've spoken with about this. So that inconvenience is something we live with and we're okay with. What we're concerned about is not really the beachgoers parking in front of our homes, but personally, I can't imagine if we've got 3 hotels a block away, that all of the employees, have employees 24 hours a day, I'm not sure where they're all going to park. Unless we have some sort of a permit program, I don't know how they're all going to not park in front of our homes, not to mention the events, the restaurants and the distillery, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm open to other solutions, and Sam Brown may have others, and I'm wide open to other solutions. I just want to point out that we're not trying to restrict anybody's access. We just need to be able to get to our houses.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Vincent Oliveri and Jenny Davis.
Vince, we welcome you tonight.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, I'm Vincent Oliveri. I live on 43rd Street, which is kind of ground zero for all of this. We are 1 block north of the old Cavalier Hotel. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do want to remind council that in July of 2012, you passed a resolution at that time directing the city manager to develop a strategic parking strategy. And the first item for him to consider was to protect established residential neighborhoods by reducing or removing on-street parking pressures created by public beach use and the need for business employee parking. We're just asking you to protect our neighborhoods. That's all this is all about. Our civic lead has been dealing with this issue for 4 years since the project started. And we've talked, we've argued, we've debated, we've talked about various different options, and what's presented to you tonight is what we think is the best option possible. The time is important because we're concerned about our residents coming home and being able to park after work. The employee issue is important because if they're allowed to have permits to park, well, that basically will prevent some of our residents from being able to park, because there is limited parking on the street. The houses are 50 feet wide, the lots are 50 feet wide, so maybe 1, maybe 2 cars can park side by side. Many of the newer units have garages, but most of the older units are grandfathered in with garage apartments and no parking or no garages at all. So they need to use the street. And I guess basically that's it. I mean, it's really all about our neighborhood. Oh, excuse me, one more point that was brought up, and the woman from the main beach area in the original RPP program. Why are we different? The original RPP program was designed for the entire area of the beach and to deal with businesses that were grandfathered and had no parking on site for their employees and their guests. This project here was approved by council as part of the new form-based code. Was represented to us that there would not be any parking problems in our neighborhood, and as we're starting to see, that is not the case. We're asking you to protect our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Next,
Jerry Davis and Steve Burwell.
we welcome you tonight, Jerry.
Thank you, Mayor. Clearly, I'm not Jenny Davis.
That's nice, Jerry.
Sorry, I can't read at this hour.
That's my handwriting. At the risk of being redundant, I'm going to press on and be very brief. We just want to park at our homes when we come home from work. It's that simple. Now, most of us get home around 4 or 5. We just want to park there. The city created the parking problem, and we're now respectfully asking the city to fix it. That's all we want. It's an issue that doesn't affect any streets beyond 45th, and it's a unique situation that requires a unique solution. I can't overemphasize the need for the 5 p.m. to 6 a.m. limits. We're a community of families, most of whom work during the day and get home between 4 and 6. We have people with kids, we have elderly people like myself, and we really need some relief. It gets worse by the day. And all we're asking is just to make this one exception on the RPP, and we all be all set and should be good. And that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Steve Burwell and Michael
Steve, we welcome
LaGilia.
you tonight, sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I'm not as old as he is. Hard to believe we were here nearly 4 years ago discussing the Cavalier project. I mean, it's kind of freaky. There's some faces that have changed, but it's just, and at that meeting, we pushed back heavily, and I don't know if you remember, on the parking and the adequacy of it. And as you also know, and it's been discussed, we were designed our neighborhood in the 20s, and today it's ironic. You go down our street with cars parked on both sides, and you can't get two cars down the main street. So it's a kind of a throwback that we all love. Having said that, we love our neighborhood, and we happily live there. We already, if I have, I don't have many friends, but if I have more than two of them over in two cars, you have to plan with your neighbors, see who's home, see, where you're going to be able to park their cars. Because there is no, you're going to hear this over and over. There is no parking. And having said that, obviously there's no room for commercial parking. Oddly enough, back when this came up 4 years ago and we left here and the Cavaliers were going forward, we argued mightily and weren't ready to do any restricted parking. It just seemed way over for us. And then as time has gone on, we've seen what's happened even during construction, and then more lately with these folks starting to show up. We're adamantly as a group, and from the grassroots come together, and now we have 90% of our folks that want that. We have no choice. You've heard that again. We have no choice but to ask for this restricted parking, and believe it or not, it is a burden. I mean, to have all these things you got to put on your window and permits you have to pass out and all that. And when we were here 4 years ago, you folks were supportive of the issue. I mean, I think the discussion was, we think we got it right. The developer's going to do the right thing, and I don't think any of that changed, but y'all were supportive, and even with that, Ms. Wilson, you said to us that the council's here to solve problems for the citizens. We have a problem. We need help, and we're back here asking for your help. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Michael Agelia and Greg Brown.
We welcome you tonight, sir.
Thank you so much. My name is Michael Agelia. I live on Cavalier Drive, right across the street from what used to be the old Cavalier Garage. Wonderful neighbor. I never had any problem with him at all. It was a great place to live. I'm past president of the Retailers Association down at the ocean front, past president of the Old Beach Civic Association. I know what was going on down there. I know when they passed the RPP, I had stuff to do with it. On both sides of the island. Sometimes I was pleased with what was happening, and sometimes I wasn't. But what they've ended up with works for them. Now, you got to understand, I want to try to address some of the things that everybody else is not talking about. You got hotel overflow. Whenever people go down and stay in a hotel, they've always got people stopping in to say hi. I used to run a parking lot down there. I'm a wealth of knowledge. You can ask me about anything, I'll tell you about it. But a lot of my business was people going down, hanging out with their friends who were staying in the hotels. We haven't even addressed any of that stuff. I mean, where are those people going to park? Hey, they're going to park in our neighborhood. You've already taken off. We used to have parking on Cavalier Drive, one end to the other, okay? Now they've taken a lot of that out. There's only 4 spaces left on Cavalier Drive. They just disappeared. They're not coming back. All of these people used to be able to park somewhere. Now, we're not going to have that anymore. And everybody's already addressed the guy across the street from me. I don't know what it is, a 4,000 square foot house. It's well over $1 million for it. He's got 2 spaces in his garage, no parking on his apron. His daughter lives with him. He's got a unit built in with his, and all of a sudden he wants to, where's his daughter going to park? Hey, he wants to park in front of my house. He wants to park over in the neighborhood. He's only got 2 spaces. I mean, these are things that haven't been addressed that are going to kill us. All of these people are going to come in, sit on top of us, choke us to death. It's not something we want to address 2 or 3 years from now. You look at the employees down in the resort area. I used to be president of the Retail Association. I understand. I know how it works. Where do you put them? You put them on Atlantic Avenue, Pacific Avenue, Baltic, Arctic, Mediterranean, Cypress. You got all of those streets down there to put them on. They're all curb and guttered, large right-of-ways. What do we got up our, these squeaky little right-of-ways, no curb and gutters. It goes from Atlantic Avenue to Holly Road. There's nothing else in there. There's so many different things that makes us different than everybody else, all the other RPPs. We need 5 o'clock. We need the RPP, and we need it at 5 o'clock, and we need to know it, no employees. That's, that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming out. Next speaker, please.
Greg Brown?
We welcome you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Greg Brown. I live on 43rd Street. I want to give you sort of a visual picture of what life has been like. I've been on a property for about 46 years, most of it coming and going with the Navy. But what I've seen recently, when we started the Civic League about 4 years ago and the subject RPP came up, I didn't know what it was. When I found out what it was, I said, we don't need it. Over the past couple of years, it has changed dramatically. I could go in front of my house and either park in front of my house or on the other side of the street. I am now walking 6 houses down to find a parking spot on my street in normal times. But let me paint what it's really like. When we have a big marathon, the locals know the streets are going to be gridlocked. Don't even try to leave your parking spot because you can't get back. Here's what I'm faced with. If you go onto the Cavalier Walkway and you step out of my front door and look to the right, I've got one house between me and the hotel, the old Cavalier Hotel. I used to have a summertime only hotel, the old Cavalier, and a year-round hotel on the other side. Suddenly, I'm going to be faced with 3 hotels, 6 restaurants, spas, convention centers, okay? The way I visualize it, take your home and park it next to Times Square. That's what I see happening. All of a sudden, my house is surrounded, literally one house away by that. I've attended my first 2:30 session here. I'm new to civics, so this is all new to me. And listen to you folks get briefed on it. I'm now at my very first and maybe only last council meeting that I'll ever attend to. But one of the themes that I heard this afternoon at the 2:30 session, citizens come to you going, help. You're here to serve the citizens. I'm one of the citizens. I happen to be the vice president of the Civic League, so I'm representing them also, but I'm coming to you as a private citizen. I need help. Signs, I'll live with the signs if I have to, because it's part of the process. The 5 o'clock is critical. If you play with any other time, it's going to be meaningless. And bottom line is, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for coming down tonight.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
That's
Next
all the speakers, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Who wants to make a motion, and then we'll start some discussion.
I'll make a motion.
All right, well, I'm waiting to hear it.
I'll second. I'm going to make a motion. I believe the key issue here is the timing. And I think the neighborhood has made a case for the 5 o'clock timeframe. I think if we set the 5 o'clock timeframe, frankly, it takes care of the employee issue because it's still 5 o'clock. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve the ordinance with the deletions of the wording, no permit, however, shall be issued pursuant to this subsection for employee parking in the Cavalier Shores neighborhood, which is reflected at the end of line 72 and on line 73 and 74.
That's your motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and 2 seconds. Discussion, Mr. Moss.
Discussion. This is a question for the city attorney, Mr. Make sure. If I understand that motion, the operational effect of that motion is that there would be employee permits permitted for parking in that neighborhood. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, then I do have some discussion. You know, I do think that people are coming here asking us for help. And this situation is not a situation that the neighborhood created. This city council, not my vote, but this city council, a majority decided that for the benefit of economic development, historic preservation and a number of things, which I'll take at face value that they were honorable motivations. Not only rezone, but then grant additional parcel subdivisions and a lot of other things to prevent this intense development. Now, the impact has now put their neighborhood on the endangered species list, and they're saying, hey, you created this problem, this we're now manifested with, and I think of the golden rule. If that was my home and I lived there, how would I vote? How would I vote if that was my home? And I lived there every day, and when I came home from work or wherever I was, there was no place to park. And I was parking 6, 7 blocks away, rain or whatever, and that this isn't like, if not for our action, that wouldn't be the case. So why isn't it responsible for the people who created the burden on the neighborhood would provide this? Now, we have had represented to us that the developer of the property says doesn't need and willing to sign away that he doesn't need employee parking. Well, if that's all true, then what is the barrier unless there's some other development that wants to use it because he says he's not going to and is willing to sign a paper to that effect, an affidavit, if I remember correctly. So if that's the case, is it just because we're not wanting to set the precedent such that other neighborhoods and other parts of the beach that's always been a resort of that magnitude will say, well, we want the same thing. I understand that, and I'm sure but two wrongs do not make a right. And we created the harm that they're dealing with. And I don't know how we walk away, and I understand, Mr. Mayor, about dealing with those other neighborhoods, and that's gonna take a lot of backbone. But I've never been short of that, and I don't mind being the odd man out. But I also know is that these people have a problem that they're not responsible for. And I think, in good conscience, like I said, your parents always teach you those old things about golden rule and, the simple things what you learned back in kindergarten. But to do anything other than granting the relief that they've asked is an injustice to that neighborhood. And we're making them bear the cost of our decision. And we didn't have to make that choice. That was a discretionary act on our part. And they didn't come up here right away and say, hey, solve my problem and oppose that project, as you may recall. But they said, hey, but we may need help. Well, now they've come back and said, it didn't turn out like we planned, help us solve our problem. And as much as I have a lot of respect for my good friend, the Vice Mayor, and would love to otherwise support him, I just believe that the neighborhoods, we should be standing up for the neighborhood and not for the employees.
Ben?
I'd like to, I've learned a lesson from my counterpart, John Moss, who I respect very much, and I think that comrades shouldn't have to defend themselves. And what was the property zoned? What could they have put on it by right at the Cavalier prior to the rezoning?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking.
Well, I'm asking you what I know. The staff certainly, they couldn't have put the homes. That took some addition.
Could they have put apartments?
I wouldn't say that they could or could
Could they
not
have put 2,000 apartments by right?
I don't think so.
I think that's the case. Does anybody? So I'm just making the point that, you're talking about the council making a decision.
But if they put into.
In some ways, they.
Let's walk that down.
Sure.
Let's walk. So if they did put in all those apartments, guess what they have to provide for all those apartments? Parking. Are they providing all the parking that goes with for all the employees, all the guests, all the events, and all the things that take place at that hotel?
I think I wasn't on the council when it was approved, but I think, yes, I think there are going to be parking garages, and I think that was taken into account when they approved it.
And if that is true, and if you have high confidence that that is true, then there is no injury to any stakeholder by granting the request of the neighborhood, because no employee will be disimpacted, no resident will be impacted, so all you're granting them is something with a win-win situation. So therefore, there should be no opposition to the request, because there's no adverse impact on the other people, only on the neighborhood if we don't grant it.
What about the adverse impact on those who are in the RPP program on the south end of the beach?
I've already said is, If we had rezoned some big thing in their place, like we did the Cavalier and created a situation, then maybe we should revisit that as well, and I look forward to revisiting those.
Okay, Mrs. Henley?
Yeah, I really appreciate the position that the neighborhood's in, and I think that probably, from what I'm hearing, is that they have decided that they need to be in the RPP program. But I think the question is not just, is the amendment to the program, if I'm hearing right. And I really understand I think I understand what they're saying, but I've heard some of them come up and say, I don't really know what's in this ordinance, which makes me a little bit uncertain about moving forward at this point. You know, we have a policy, or we had a policy at one time, that we would have a briefing on something new 1 week, and then a public hearing, and then we would vote the following week. And it is making it difficult to get all of this understood and clarified to vote at this point. I really think the employee situation is an important thing, and so I'm not sure why my colleagues want to remove that sentence. And I didn't know until I got the letter from the RAC that there was this great concern over the time. I'm just a little bit, I want to do the right thing, and I'm having a little bit of trouble trying to figure out exactly what that right thing is. So if anybody wants to clarify it for me.
Well, John Ernst just offered to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, you know, the RPP program since 1992 has been a really important tool for protecting the neighborhoods. And as you know, I've been a big proponent of that, and we've done, in 11 years I've been here, we've done an awful lot of things to actually beef up that program and make it more enforceable and make sure that it has teeth, make sure that the people who are using it are accountable for that. And we still continue to do an awful lot of work for that. I will say that in terms of our parking program at the oceanfront, one of the most critical things that we've been working on over these many years is consistency. And what we have down there right now, and we've done a better job, but we still have a lot more to do, is a very inconsistent, stitched together parking system. There's different rules for this garage and different rules for this lot and what have you. And so we've worked really hard where we have the opportunities to create a consistent policy throughout it, so that our parkers, people that are parking at the resort, know what the rules are, that the residents know what the rules are. It's very difficult to say that you can park on this street up until a certain time, but you go over a few streets and you can't. So, you know, I'm certainly for protecting the neighborhoods, and I think the RPP program is an important tool for that. And the 1992 ordinance actually anticipated that this neighborhood would be eligible for that, because they are located where other commercial entities are. So I've got some grave concerns about splintering that and making it different than what the rest of the program is. And so that's the here and now part. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts about, you know, how do we actually communicate to the public what the rules are. The second part is a precedent. And I think that we need to understand that you know, this neighborhood wants to be able to park and certainly deserves to be able to park in their neighborhood. But in fairness, all of the other people that are in the RPP also come home from work at 5 o'clock. They also have groceries that they are unloading as well. And so if this council decides that we are going to change that program to 5 o'clock, we certainly need to understand that the other neighborhoods are going to ask for the same relief as well. This program was set up, as many people have said here tonight, that it was set up to protect the neighborhoods against late night behavior. It was not set up to provide parking or ensure that people had parking in front of their homes. It was set up because we had large groups of people that were partying and hanging out on Atlantic Avenue until late at night, parking in the neighborhoods, and then coming back and then essentially waking everybody up and not allowing them to park or to enjoy their homes. The 8 o'clock that we currently have would mean that no one would be able to park there, including anyone from the Cavalier if they are a guest or if they are a member, a resident there too, because neither guests of the hotel nor owners of the residence there would be eligible to get a pass in the RPP program. So they would, after 8 o'clock and overnight, they would not be allowed to park in front of those homes. So what I'd like to do, Mr. Mayor, if I might, is make a substitute motion that we approve the ordinance as presented, but that we actually have it reflect the actual program, which would be that it would start at 8 o'clock, and so we would strike through the other parts that are there. And I would suggest that if this does become a problem, if this does not have the intended consequence of preventing other residents from nearby developments from parking there and what have you, that we would come back, but I would ask that this council, as opposed to doing it as, you know, this handful of streets, this 125 homes, that we look at it as a comprehensive program. And, you know, I would submit to you that there are many neighborhoods that are impacted by people parking in front of their homes. And so that really applies to every single beachfront neighborhood that we have. It includes Sandbridge, it includes the rest of the north end, includes all the bayfront beaches. They are inconvenienced by people parking in front of their homes. And if it is necessary that we give them a legislative fix to do that, we just need to understand what the impact is. That means that they certainly would be allowed to come before this council and ask for similar protections to what we would be offering here. I would also tell you that it's not just an oceanfront or a beachfront issue. There are neighborhoods all over our city that are impacted by people parking that don't live there in front of their homes. I mean, I take my girls to soccer at Betty F. Williams Farm every Saturday, and we park in front of somebody's home. And so I just caution us that if we're going to make a substantive change, which this really is, and we are going to set that precedent, we need to do it with the full knowledge that this is going to open up, as Bobby Dyer says, an awful lot of potential unintended consequences. And so, having said that, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a substitute motion, as I already mentioned.
I have a motion, a substitute motion. Have a second?
John, you know, it's one of those things where I'm very conflicted on this thing. I'm inclined to second your motion from the standpoint that I think that we have to be equitable to everybody involved. Is it possible in Robert's Rules of Order to make a substitute motion to defer?
No, I'll let you all talk. Maybe y'all can come together with one.
Well, you know, my concern here is that there's obviously a problem in this community, and I think that there may be a way for us to work on the overall RPP program, which I know has been worked on ad nauseum. But I think that the 5 o'clock makes a lot of sense from the standpoint, especially from this community, that if I come home from work, I want to be able to know that I can park in my neighborhood. It's different, I think, from the south end. Mr. Oliveri brought up the point that the reason for the RPP program initially was to bring in grandfathered uses, which this is clearly not. So I think that is a differentiator. I think that this is something that warrants more discussion and more thought from staff.
Thank you. Shannon?
I guess I have a question. What if we were to approve this with what you're suggesting, John, but put a one-year time limit on it? Because then they can come back next year and we can see whether or not there are employee problems or resident problems. And if Mr. Thompson does happen to come back and ask us for parking for whatever, we know because more has been developed and more has been built and the project's more solidified, would that be something that we could do to put a one-year time frame on that?
I'd be fine to put it.
Sounds like you'd do it. Other comments? Bobby?
Yeah, I think when we talk about justice, we have to talk about uniqueness. And I think we have a very unique neighborhood right here. And I agree with Mr. Davenport, and I agree with Mr. Moss, that I think part of the dilemma that we face is the uniqueness of this property. You know, you go down to Old Dominion, I used to work down there, and 1 block away from where I used to work, you can't park. You know, signs all over the place that, you know, you can't park in the neighborhoods there because it was disruptive to the neighborhoods. And I'm not sure, I haven't gone to a football game yet, but I'm sure that, sometimes it's, kind of tough down there. But the thing is, I think, when we talk about justice, we have to be sensitive to, once again, the uniqueness of the neighborhood and also the logistics of the parking dilemma that they already have. And, if they're having problems getting into, to the new development and everything, I think you got to ask how you get a fire truck in there and a few other things that you got to consider about overflow. So I think we have to take a look at the problem in total. But the point is, though, I'm inclined, to go along with the 5 o'clock time, based on the uniqueness. And, the thing is that we can revisit, later the employee situation. But I think if I get a read on what the residents want right now, the most critical part is the 5 o'clock right now. So, that's where I'm going to be leaning.
Thank you. Others, Jessica.
Well, everybody else has spoke, so I feel like I should say something. I think when somebody buys a house, they buy a house under the impression that they're going to be able to park in their driveway or in front of their home at the very least. So I understand and sympathize. I think 5 o'clock is a very reasonable time frame. My personal opinion would be that we revise all of it to a 5 o'clock. I mean, I don't know a lot of people who don't come home at 5 o'clock and are looking for a parking space. I mean, I live in a cul-de-sac in Indian Lakes, and I shake my fist at my neighbors who have too many cars too. So, but my situation is different. I can walk. There's plenty of street parking if I can't get close enough to my home. So I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Davenport. I think a deferral is probably best. This is a really sensitive issue, and I also agree with Councilman Dyer. I think the 5 o'clock is a big issue and should be looked at for all of the communities participating.
Jessica, Counsel, if I may say something. I was raised on 45th and a half Street, and I raised my family on 45th and a half Street in the same family home. I drive by this area every day. This area, as is any area of the city of Virginia, we're lucky to live in the city, but especially up there when you're so close to the beautiful beach that's there, along with being able to get somewhere by biking, walking, or whatever. It's a young lady said it was a privilege to be there, and it is a privilege to live in that area, so question my mind. But as I said, I drive by there, and I've made a point to drive up and down those streets every day for the last 60, 70 days. And they do have a parking problem, and it does need to be dealt with. But I can take you to 46th Street, which I'm looking at a young lady that lives on 46th Street right now. I can take you to 48th Street. I can take you to 49th Street. And if you've driven down that road with me yesterday, again, granted a holiday, just as many cars on every one of those roads. And then also to hear from the young lady, and she spoke very eloquently about the situation at the South End. We have established a program that has worked pretty well. And my preference would be that we try what we have first, but I don't think that's what the council wants. That being the case, I think if we're going to do something, we should hopefully build consensus and let it serve the entire area that's impacted by parking, which should be the South End. And please understand, if we're going to do something, don't cut it off at 45th Street, because the same issues are there. I can also take you to a hotel in the middle of the North End, which is no different than what the Cavalier is. It's one property. I remember when they did the addition to them, I call it the Mariner, it's called the Wyndham now. And my thing to you is, people didn't want the big building built. And this is long before I was ever on council, but the big building got built. Is the parking good there 95% of the time? It absolutely is. But have I personally been there and had to park across the street? I have. Well, I got to help that neighborhood if they're going to have the same type of problems as the Cavalier would present. And so I would suggest if maybe Jessica and Ben would ask maybe Mr. Earn if he would pull back on his substitute motion and see if we can have a deferral of this. This thing we've got time to deal with. The property's not going to open until December. it's not going to be extremely busy and, until the summertime or spring. But we can ask staff to really do some heavy lifting and ask, Mr. Earn to have involvement and whoever else on the council to see if we can bring forward a policy that hopefully we could do for the entire part of the city that's being so impacted by this parking. I want to reiterate, we're blessed to have this oceanfront, and we want every citizen of Virginia Beach to feel comfortable in using that oceanfront. One thing that I take away that I saw this weekend is on 43rd Street, someone coming off the beach at 7 o'clock, and it was someone who lived in Bay Colony, and they were parked on 43rd Street. They're not going to have that privilege again if we, do this. I hope we can figure something out. But if you want to do a substitute, would you agree to pull in that?
Would you amend your motion?
You don't have a
To defer? Huh?
No, you didn't have a second.
He didn't have a second
yet.
Well, you can make a motion.
Well,
A substitute motion.
And John, I'm sorry, I know how hard you've worked on this. This is something that I'm very conflicted about, and I've learned a lot tonight. I would like to make a substitute motion to defer this and give the staff more time. I'd ask for a 60-day deferral. I think that would give staff adequate time to examine the issue. My opinion is the only reason I can't go with you all tonight 100% is I think we have to be fair and equitable to everybody. And I think even though yours is a unique situation to the south end, I think that we have to be conscious of those on the south end and the same types of issues that they're having. So, John, I would ask to
Jessica, you want to second that?
Yeah, I'll second it.
I'm fine with that, Ben. You might want to ask staff how long they're going to need to actually come up with a plan.
That's
60 days
a
may not
wise
be.
idea.
Like 90 is at least minimum.
We're going to start with 60 days.
We agree on 60.
I have a motion and a second for a substitute motion. We'll vote on the substitute motion first. Call substitute motion first, please.
Mrs. Kane, may I have your vote? By 8-3, you have,
No, wait, did I do the wrong thing?
you did nay.
What was I voting on?
The
Which
substitute,
one?
there's a
The
deferral.
deferral, the motion to
Oh, well, then
defer.
I wanted to say yes for that. I'm
All
sorry.
right, I'll give you a verbal yay.
Okay,
Thank you.
very
I'm
good.
So it'll be 8-2.
Thank you. We'll now move on to planning. We're getting there. I believe it's item number 8. No, it's item number 4, New Millennium Senior Living Communities. This was on consent. If you would please call forward the opposition, please.
The opposition before the rep,
Please. This is on consent. How many speakers first?
we have 2 speakers opposed and 1 representing.
Okay, if we could have the 2 opposed speakers, please.
Todd Solomon,
That doesn't give them a chance to respond to the proposal. I don't like that.
Todd, we welcome you tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Sessoms, city council members. I appreciate your time tonight. Hopefully, this is an easy one compared to that one, but I am asking, my name's Todd Solomon. I live off of Shore Drive in Cape Story, and I am asking for a deferral tonight so we can discuss with traffic engineers the current intersection that they have planned for this new development at Indian Hill Road and Shore Drive. Currently, it's a 2-car potential turn. With this new development and the plans there, they're making a 4-car potential conflict area. And as you know, with Shore Drive, we've been working on trying to make it as safe as possible for the last 17, 20 years, something like that. So if we could try to avoid adding potential increases of safety issues throughout Shore Drive where we can, and the need for this and the extra turning there to cross Shore Drive when you're coming out, I don't feel there is no need for this. You have an existing one 500 feet away, which you can make those turns, and then you also are going to be adding one where you can come out the first court and a stoplight where it's much, much more safe. And the residents that'll be driving there are going to be in their 60s to 80s, and if they still have licenses, coming out at first court at a stoplight is much more safe than trying to cross Shore Drive and potential conflicts. So I would like, if possible, I know residents have spoken up at Shore Drive's meetings and also the Bayfront Advisory Committee meetings at this potential conflict. And obviously, it hasn't changed since the Planning Commission and traffic engineers haven't made any modifications. They're still keeping it as that new four-way impact. So we'd like to have that revisited and looked at. I don't think keeping it as a two-way and maybe preventing potential crossing there, making it a little cleaner and more understandable, I don't think it's going to have an impact to development. Like I said, they've got two other accesses where they can still come out and make those turns going west on Shore Drive. So we'd like to ask for
Are you
that.
representing yourself or your civic league?
I'm representing myself. There wasn't an official vote, but Shore Drive does have a standing safety position, so this falls kind of under that. But I'm representing the people that I've heard at.
Maybe we can fix this for you.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there another speaker before?
Barbara Messner?
We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. First, I agree with Todd. I lived over on Shore Drive before, and there's so many new developments, there's so much traffic. This is already flashing. But I'd like to use this opportunity to apologize to Mr. Davenport for confusing him with John Yearn, whose wife works for the Cavalier.
Let's stay on the.
I am,
Thank
this is
you.
my 3 minutes.
You're supposed to talk about the subject at hand.
I am talking about Mr. Moss. I don't appreciate you bullying me when I sit down. If you want to correct
Young lady,
me-
I'm going to ask you to stay with the topic that you're speaking on, please.
Okay. But please
I'll be happy to
ask
meet
me
with you afterwards.
questions while I'm standing here, not when I'm sitting down, because I'm more than happy to correct my mistake. Good evening.
R.J. Nutter?
RJ, as you're walking up, did you hear the concerns that Todd raised? Mr.
And they've been raised, and actually, we asked staff to look at them before we went to the planning commission, because we had it been raised at one meeting, but I want you to know that the overwhelming majority of the people throughout that district support this application and the access ways that are presented. We met with Taste Unlimited, who lives right across, works right across the street. I've got a letter here from the church, Bay Lake United Methodist, which is the one giving up on their soccer facilities in favor of this. In fact, when I went back to Bay Lake, the church there, which also has a median break, the concern that they raised, they said, we cannot close off the median break where you will go and enter because it'll put more pressure on our median break, which is in front of the church. That's the problem. You just can't cut off one median break without impacting others around it. So, but I can tell you, Mr. Mayor, first of all, I like to solve problems. I'm not trying to avoid one with Todd by any stretch. But I can tell you what, after this issue was raised, we went back to staff and said, can you tell us what the right answer is? We will pursue it. And they said, you're on the right course. The median break should stay open. You're putting in a right turn lane. You've offered to put in a left turn lane. And so we're not concerned. The other thing they said is the volume of traffic here, and I must say, this is a senior living house project. I'm in my 60s. Somehow I made it into the parking garage and at my place where I work, and I made it into the parking space out here without causing a wreck. So please don't put people, and I know we're all being bashful about our own ages up here, but I think a large percentage of us would be in a category that, frankly, we can feel pretty comfortable at how we drive. So having said that, we went back and asked the staff, and they said, no, you're fine. I would tell you this, what we did offer to do, and by the way, this never came at Planning Commission. No one raised it at Planning Commission. Planning Commission was fine with it. But one thing I did add, we said if this ever came up, we would be happy to ask our staff, which, by the way, is the largest percentage of drivers at this facility. The average age of the person in the assisted living facility is 85. The average age of the person in the independent living is 80. They often start with a car. They usually give up the car within the first year. So the amount of in fact, if you remember, how many of you have ever seen a traffic jam at Westminster Canterbury? And they have more than double the number of units at this facility. So, and they have one access point. So my point.
Any other questions, Mr. Nutter?
Can I ask the
I just
staff to
want to ask
respond?
the staff a
Yes, sir,
question.
thank you, I appreciate that.
Sure, we had
traffic engineering today. We re-looked at this just to make sure we were in agreement. Traffic engineering does not want to close the median. They will require the median to be reworked with the turn lane. The applicant's fully aware of that. Traffic engineering is totally comfortable with the traffic program that they have recommended.
And you're in agreement with all?
We are indeed.
Mr. Jones?
Oh, one more thing. It's a with RJ's, it's a 35-mile-an-hour road. And so they really don't see any issues related to that existing median. Sorry.
Are there any other speakers?
No, Your Honor.
May I make a motion, Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Vice Mayor, I'd love to have another motion.
Maybe I can get this one.
I'm betting on you right now.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of the application.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? I'll call for the question, please.
By a vote of 11-0, you have approved the application of New Millennium.
Item number 8, I believe now, is Franklin Johnson Group Management and Development, LLC, and Virginia Wesleyan College. If you'll call the speakers, please.
Would you like the opposed first?
I have this one as well. Would you like the opposition first? I know it's.
No, how many speakers do we have?
2 opposition and 1 representing.
It's whatever you want.
What do you want to do? Sure. You want the opposition first? Or?
Well, if it's okay with Mr. Nutter, we'll just take the opposition.
Well, I have a question, because, I wasn't gonna speak till the end, but the standard usually has been to let the person say what they're saying so that the people who are the opposition have some chance to adjust their remarks.
That's fine. Okay.
The other way, they speak, someone rebuts, and they have no chance to be heard.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Nutter.
Yes, sir. I'll be happy to. Thank you very much. For the record, my name is R.J. Nutter.
You lost again, Mr. Jones.
Bad night.
So at any rate.
We got the same color hair, too.
Thank you very much. With me tonight is Taylor Franklin with the Franklin Johnson Group and James Noel, their new in-house counsel, who is brand new with them and just left the Virginia Port Authority to assume the in-house counsel position with them. This is an application that I'll try to be brief on. I know it was on consent, and one we're very proud of. As you know, Virginia Wesleyan in the past year has decided they wanted to move to a university status, and as such, they needed to start a graduate program. And they've had a very aggressive program with regard to expansion of the facilities at the school. And the nice part about the university I found is that they have kept the adjacent neighborhood, which is L&J Gardens, up to date with everything they've been doing. In fact, when we met with the university and L&J Gardens, within weeks of filing this application, actually back in May, it was clear L&J Gardens had a long-standing relationship with the university. They regularly converse with one another, raising different issues. The university allows them to use facilities at the university. They attack common problems, development along Shore Drive and North End Boulevard, predominantly not Shore Drive. So they've been working well together. And when the university explained to them that this was a piece of property the university owned, that they were getting a graduate program, that they wanted to maintain control of this site by having a lease. In other words, that this property is only leased to Franklin Johnson Group. The university owns it. The university participates in the rent profits from this to help drive the school's programs. The university went out and searched for 11 different companies responded to the RFP to build these facilities. They picked the Franklin Johnson Group after almost 9 months of reviews and interviews. So they're very proud to be here tonight. And so when this application came forward, again, the first thing we did was sit down with the adjacent neighborhood. And I want to identify L&J Gardens for you because it's a really fascinating neighborhood. I've learned a lot about it since then. I'm not sure if this is working. But anyway, L&J Gardens is immediately next to, if you see the R15 in the corner is a church. And at R10, R15, there we go, the Norwich Avenue, Yolanda Avenue, all that area back all the way, as Mr. Jones knows, to Northampton Boulevard is L&J Gardens. It began as the first upscale African-American community in Virginia Beach. And they're very proud of that heritage. And that's why the relationship between the school and this neighborhood is so unique in my mind. But anyway, we met with them, and they were happy, asked a lot of questions, asked us to work with the residents who live immediately adjacent to it, which we did. And that's why some of them who appear to opposition to the Planning Commission aren't here tonight, because we met with them privately at their homes, looked at issues in their backyards and so forth. So in addition to that, we then obtained a letter of support from the president of the Civic League, which I'll passed out to staff earlier, but I'll pass out tonight as well. It's from Mark Thornton, the president of L&J Gardens, in support of the application. So if you don't mind, just be straight, forgive me. We go way back on names, so forgive me. At any rate, with that degree of support, we moved forward, went to the Planning Commission, had, they recommended approval unanimously, and then we started meeting. I did tell Mr. Jones I got a call from a lady who was at the, she went to the Planning Commission from Diamond Lakes, so I called her last week to try to catch up with her, and I never heard back from her, so I did try to reach out to her, but otherwise, we've worked well with L&J Gardens, and there's no opposition that we're aware from them.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. One other thing. One of the questions I heard that might be raised by one of the speakers tonight was about fencing. And I wanted to let you know that, first of all, Franklin Johnson's installing a black wrought iron fence all along Wesleyan Drive. And that's going to be matching the fencing the university is putting all along its campus, along Wesleyan and around over on Baker Road. So it would be matched that perfectly. At the hearing, we were asked, would we consider a fence in the rear of the property through the wooded area? So we agreed and met with the neighbors about the best type fence. We're installing a 6-foot black chain link fence through that entire wooded area to block off. So this will be a fully enclosed, fully fenced off neighborhood. It will have 24-hour security. This is a for-profit project. It is not a VHDA project. So it's what we call a market rate product. And as you know, they screen their employees, screen their residents quite thoroughly. They have to make 3 times their average salary to live there, or have to have a commit for that. In other words, the rent has to be 3 times the amount of their salary.
I remember that from the back.
Remember that. Thank you, sir. You know that part. So at any rate, so they've been very well received. The university excited about this. We've met with people, everyone we can try to talk to, we've met with, and we appreciate your time tonight, and we're happy to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor, or members of the council.
We'll have to bring you back up for rebuttal if we need to.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure, sir.
Next speaker, please.
Teresa Chadwick?
We welcome you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Sessoms, Vice Mayor Jones, and members of council. My name is Teresa Chadwick. I am a lifelong resident of the Diamond Lake Estates neighborhood in Virginia Beach, and I also currently serve as the Civic League president. I am here on behalf of the Diamond Lake Estates Civic League to speak in opposition of the proposed rezoning. While Franklin Johnson Group reached out to L&J Gardens and had an extensive dialogue with L&J Gardens Civic League as to their project with Virginia Wesleyan University, Diamond Lake Estates had no outreach whatsoever. The only outreach we got was our notice we got from the Planning Commission about the hearing. While I know L&J Gardens, several of their residents do have adjacent properties to the proposed land. We have land adjacent as well. Our playground right there at Maywood and Baker. I'm very happy to hear that there's going to be a fence lining the wooded area along Wesleyan Drive in Baker. That is something our Civic League has asked for. My other concern is that if you take a drive from Newtown Road, starting at Virginia Beach Boulevard, you go all the way up Newtown to where it turns into Diamond Springs, up to Northampton, you will see the several housing developments and apartment complexes that have gone up in the last 5 to 10 years. That alone should say that we do not need any more housing in the area. We also have another apartment complex that's going up at Newtown and Baker as well. With all of that said, there's also been a huge increase in traffic along Wesleyan Drive and the Northampton Boulevard corridor. Adding these apartments would only complicate the problem with traffic. And then lastly, I know that this has been an ongoing topic about the suffering infrastructure problems in our city. I really feel like that needs to be priority 1 above anything else. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks for coming down, ma'am. Thank you.
Ashley McLeod?
Ashley, we welcome you.
Thank you. Aren't I lucky there's no school board meeting tonight? It's tomorrow because today's the first day of school. I'm Ashley McLeod. I'm a resident of Wesleyan Pines. I live at 5508 Del Park Avenue. The last time I was here to speak in opposition to the road off of Northampton leading into the outlet malls. And I want to thank you all for opposing that. And I want to compliment those who took care of the traffic because so far, I can say it's not horrible right now. However, I'm here to talk about another traffic concern that could lead to that. And that would be the apartments that Teresa just spoke of that are going to go across from Virginia Wesleyan. It's J8 on your agenda. Let me first begin by complimenting the Franklin Johnston Group. They're in their in-house legal counsel. They answered all my questions. They showed every effort to be a good neighbor. But the matter of the fact is, this apartment complex will be 248 apartments and 481 parking spots in that area, adding, I round up, 500 potential cars, adding to our morning commute and our evening commute on Wesleyan Drive, which goes by the Wesleyan College as well as Norfolk Academy. So those of you who aren't familiar with he showed it to you, it's there between J Gardens and Ebenezer Baptist Church. While J Gardens was notified, as Teresa mentioned, by Virginia Wesleyan University and the builders, Campus East Community Association, in which I'm a member of, was not reached out to. Diamond Lake Estates was notified, again, like she said, by the Planning Commission. I don't question the quality of these apartments. I know that they will do a great job. They will end up well-built, just like they are on Diamond Springs Road in Northampton, where they put placed apartments there instead of the old Monarch building, warehouse distribution. It's replaced that eyesore, of which I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for Tom Johnston of the Franklin Johnston Group, who spent more than an hour on the phone with me, making sure I understood what was going to be included in the complex, to share the plan, to share that they needed to have $40,000 at least for income there. The rent's going to be $1,200 to $1,700. They're kind of attracting millennials, rooftop lounges kind of thing. It's going to be a great apartment complex. And so I totally understand also the Virginia Wesleyan's need to create some revenue stream. And I much prefer this over retail strip mall. We certainly don't need that. However, I appeal to you as a city council to please consider the impact it has on our traffic, especially in the Northwest Beach part of Virginia Beach. Teresa just spoke to it. Boyd Homes is building apartments off of Newtown and Baker Road. This morning, on my morning commute up Wesleyan Drive, it took me at 7:45. The traffic was already backed up to where the entrance to this apartment complex is going to be. Now, if I'd left on my I'm running late for work usual schedule after 8 o'clock, it would have been worse. It would have been all the way back to Baker Road itself. So I just am asking that you please consider that this commute is not just about Wesleyan Pines, Campus East, Lawson Hall, Diamond Lake Estates, Cypress Point, Ridgely Manor, Sage Farms, Thorogood, Harris Point, or Witch Duck, as I pass John sometimes in the morning, that'll contribute to the overall traffic flow. It also is going to be Chicks Beach, Bay Lake, Church Point, Cape Henry, and all the Shore Drive residents, because they all come to Northampton right there to speak.
Thank you so very much for your comment.
Thank you very much, sir.
Have a nice
Have a
evening.
good night.
Any other speakers? Mr. Jones?
This is my night, isn't it?
You know, I'm just glad I'm not, I am glad I'm not you tonight.
Well, I listened with great interest to the comments by the lady from Diamond Springs Civic League, and I am disappointed that you were not contacted, okay? The issue of the use of the property, though, is what I think I'd like to address before I make a motion.
Please.
This property, it is not realistic to expect that this property will be used for single family. I agree with what was said, and that is there should not be retail there.
I agree.
And quite frankly, this property was, as I remember, I may be mistaken, but I think I'm right. This property was given to the university by the Smith family. And it backs up to what used to be called Old Burma Road. If anybody as old as I am has here in the room remembers that. And that Burma Road is a natural break between this property and the residential properties in the back there in Diamond Springs. In fact, that road cannot be built on because there is a major water, I'm not sure whether it's a drainage pipe or a water line, but there's a major pipe that runs through that road back there. So it's not going to be built on. So there's a natural break that currently exists in the back there, separating this property from the Diamond Springs community. Given the fact that it's not suitable for single-family residents, given the fact that it's attached to the university, and I'm confident that they will, in their agreement with the Franklin Group, see that it is maintained well, and I feel like, while maybe there is some negative to the fact that there's more density, but the type of development that the university and the Franklin Group will put there is probably the best we're going to get. I think that's probably the way I see it. And for that reason, I'm going to make a motion to approve it.
I have a motion for approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Moss?
Well, I was a strong supporter of my good friend, the Vice Mayor, when we dealt with the Northampton Boulevard and the issue of traffic of not creating a third light, another light on a road that carries a lot of people because of the traffic congestion impact. And that was my reasoning, not all the economic motivations that were alluded that we were acting on, but I was acting on behalf of another traffic light. Didn't make sense of that because of the congestion. Likewise, I think that if you look up at J Gardens going further up, that vacant lot, I drive by there every day. You saw a new house that's going in there, and they're building on that lot where that road runs right next to Wesleyan Drive, that little service, kind of like a service road. They're building a home right in there to this today. You can drive by there and see it. I do think that parcel could be developed as single-family homes, could. And we've seen other places along Witchduck Road, much more marginal acreage of property where single-family homes have been built very close together, but they've been built and they sold. So that's a market test. You may be right, Mr. Mayor, that maybe it isn't, but the market tends to suggest they're putting a lot of single homes in places I never thought they would slice them into. But more importantly, I want to come back and talk about traffic, because I do think that is a legitimate issue. I respect the J neighborhood, Virginia Wesleyan. My son, when he went to George Mason, lived in a privately operated place on George Mason University, but if you weren't teaching there and weren't a student there, you couldn't live there. And they were very strict about that, and the rents were pretty steep, even for Northern Virginia, on publicly freed land. But nonetheless, I understand that's not the model being offered here. And so we are now looking at, if you look at the staff analysis, this is on page 3, the existing land use would generate 290 trips, average daily transit. With the proposed land use, it's 1,676. So that's about a, say, 1,300 increase in cars over the current average daily of the existing zoning. Now, you might say, well, maybe there's the capacity for that. That's a good trade. And sometimes that's true. So then you go over and look and say, well, is this trade space good? Because in fact, we're trading away a public investment. Now, we have an ideal of trying to have service level C throughout the community. We don't achieve it many places, but that's always a goal, and goals are a good thing.
Where is that?
I think it's like in our neighborhoods at 2 o'clock in the morning. But our Virginia Beach Boulevard on Sunday morning when I go into church, it's got a lot of capacity. So anybody who wants to come to church, I invite you to Prince Lutheran Church because you have no trouble getting there. But the average daily for service level C is 14,800. That's currently the present volume without all the development that's allowed currently working on that arterial network is 18,715. This would add 1,676, but then that increases 1,300. I mean, that's the fair thing to look at. But if you look at it's almost a 10% degradation against the service level we want to buy. So I understand the idea of trying to generate income for this place, but who's providing the income and the offset for that light cycle that you sit in 2 or 3 more times to get out when at least half those cars are trying to get out between 7 and 9 in the morning to go to work, and it's that one place that goes in and out. That traffic cycle has to change. I didn't see any analysis about the wait times and what, so those people's time is valuable, and that's not an economic calculus. So one person's profit is paid for by another person's time. So then it gets, so then you get back to say, is it really true that the property can't be constructively developed at the current zoning? And if that were really true, then I would yield to Mr. Lewis, Mr. Vice Mayor's position. But I believe that no one's established that is true, given the pattern of development elsewhere in the Bayside Borough on similar parcels of property where single-family homes have been built. So then it comes down to, in my opinion, is the need to generate income for the university, and a good neighbor that they are, prevail and has a higher utility than the increased wait times that we impose on people 365 days a year because we've allowed that development. And that is and I'm not going to criticize someone who thinks differently, because I think you can come to an honest difference of opinion on this issue, depending on how you see it. Today, I just can't share the issue with the vice mayor, but I have no criticism about why he thinks that works. We just agree to disagree, and I can't support.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Jim, did you want to say something?
The only thing I need to say is I'm going to be abstaining on this. I've talked to the city attorney about it and I'll have a letter on it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'll call for the question.
By a vote of 8-2, with Mr. Wood abstaining, you have approved the application.
Council, I think we have addressed everything prior to appointments and then open mic.
No,
Did we get 9?
Did we forget something?
No, we did 9.
9 we did,
We did it.
under
Yes.
consent.
We did 9.
did you do 2?
Okay, Mr. City Attorney, if I missed something,
I don't know.
I very easily could
Maybe
have.
my notes are wrong. If everybody else thinks you have, then
What
you have, I'm sorry.
Totally understandable.
I think the vice mayor's done an awesome job. Let's go to, we have a
We
few
got some
appointments.
sausage going on here today.
We got two appointments. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to nominate to the Housing Advisory Board Hunter D. Hanger, and to the Parks and Recreation Commission, William Funk.
Do I hear any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll call for the question.
By a vote of 11-0, you have appointed the 2 named by the vice mayor.
Actually, it's Bronky, not Vunky.
Okay, is there any unfinished business? Is there any new business? We will adjourn.